Thank you all for joining our Math Summit to work collaboratively to answer some of the most pressing questions about mathematics achievement in our country. Why are we seeing steep declines in mathematics, particularly for our struggling students? Why were the declines so widespread across the country? And how can we help students along the road to recovery? Of course, to know where we're going and what the road ahead looks like, we need to start by taking a look at where we've been. So I will be providing you with key takeaways that you should know from the entire round of COVID-19 data collections that NCES conducted. Over the last year, NCES has released critical results from the National Assessment of Educational Progress, or NAEP. These results showed how students were performing during the pandemic. August 2022, first ever score decline in math since 1973. Largest score drop in reading since 1990 for 9-year-olds. October 2022, largest score declines in NAEP math, widespread declines in NAEP reading at grades 4 and 8. April 2023, civic scores declined for the first time, and U.S. history score continues to decline for 8th graders. June 2023, score declines again for 13-year-olds in basic math and reading. These sobering results from a series of special data collections undertaken by NCES led us to convene this summit. However, the story does not begin with the pandemic. During January through March of 2019, NCES administered mathematics assessments to around 300,000 4th and 8th graders, and then, in early 2020, to a smaller sample of about 18,000 9 and 13-year-olds through our age-based long-term trend assessments. Even before the pandemic, there were troubling signs about students' math achievement. NAEP results showed that math scores were falling from where they were in 2013. Both in grades 4 and 8, overall scores were lower in 2019 than in 2013. When looking closer, scores were dropping in 3 out of 5 content areas at grade 4 and 4 out of 5 content areas in grade 8. Prior to the pandemic, there were already signs of trouble in students mastering fundamental mathematics concepts. We also reported scores for students at various points on the performance distribution, ranging from the lowest, the 10th percentile, to the highest, the 90th percentile. Even before the pandemic, scores for lower performers, those scoring at the 10th and 25th percentiles, were declining, while the top performers, those scoring at the 90th percentile, improved before the pandemic. This divergence contributed to wider achievement gaps. And public school students in half the states were already showing signs of declines in grade 8 math before the pandemic, with declines ranging from less than 3 points in some states to 10 points or more in other states. In 2021, we were scheduled to be in the field assessing 4th and 8th graders across the country in mathematics and reading. But it became clear to us that that would not be possible. So for the first time in the history of the program, we asked Congress to reschedule the assessments. But we did use that time to launch a series of surveys to give us insights into the students' learning conditions and teachers' working conditions during the pandemic. We used our monthly school surveys and school and teacher surveys. These special data collections told us volumes about our students, teachers, and school leaders and what they were experiencing. The pandemic that was declared in March 2020 brought about major disruptions and change in how students received instruction. The new monthly survey that we launched during the spring of 2021 showed that in-person enrollment for 4th and 8th graders was still hovering around 50%. In-person enrollment varied across the country, with higher rates in the Midwest and South, and in towns and rural areas. By the 2021-22 school year, almost all students were enrolled in full-time in-person learning modes, but we all knew that previous disruptions would have an impact on student performance ahead. We just didn't know by how much. Our data collections during the 2022-23 school year, which included assessments of 4th and 8th graders and 9 and 13-year-olds, gave us our clearest picture yet of the COVID-19 pandemic's impact on the academic achievement and the well-being of our students, teachers, and schools. There were declines at the national level for both 4th and 8th graders in mathematics, the largest declines since the early 1990s. And students' math scores fell across all of the content areas. And math scores fell for most student racial ethnic groups, and for boys and girls, and for students of every socioeconomic status level. These declines set student achievement back significantly. Lower, middle, and higher performing students lost ground, and lower performers losing more ground than higher performers at grade 4. I want to point out that the magnitude of these changes at the national level, particularly for grade 8 math, were not previously seen. And the score declines in 2013 grew even more in grade 8 math, with every state except Utah posting a score decline at grade 8 math between 2013 and 2022. I would like to spend a few minutes on some data that provide important context for these achievement results, and which help us identify areas that deserve extra focus as we travel along the road to recovery. These data on student health and well-being, absenteeism, confidence in mathematics skills, teacher vacancies, and community health and income factors come from a combination of our NAEP data collections and our school pulse panel data collections. We have been seeing worrying signs of decline in indicators of student health and well-being. More than 2/3 of schools reported an increase in students seeking mental health services. Almost half of schools did not agree that they can effectively provide these mental health services to all students who needed them. And schools explained that insufficient staff and inadequate funding were leading limitations in providing these mental health services to all students. Here is one area where we need to do better. We've also seen rising rates of chronic absenteeism among our students. Almost 3/4 of public schools reported in May of 2022 that chronic absenteeism has increased since before the pandemic. Survey data collected as part of the NAEP 2022 assessments corroborated this finding. On average, 22% of 4th grade public school students reported being absent 5 days or more in the month preceding the date they took the NAEP assessment, double the percentage in 2019. Examining results across the states and by student group reveals similar patterns. In fact, fourth graders reported increased absenteeism in every state where data are reportable. And students by gender, race, ethnicity, region of the country, and school locale all reported increased absenteeism. These results are similar at grade 8. The increase in student absenteeism between 2019 and 2022 was associated with decreases in NAEP scores from 2019 to 2022. The observed association is large enough to explain 27% of the score declines for grade 4 math and 16% for grade 8 math. We survey students on their math confidence skills. For example, can you calculate a 20% tip on a $67 dinner bill? Or can you give examples to show a math statement is false? Nationally, in 2022, 40% of 8th grade students reported being highly confident in their math skills and knowledge, a decline of 8 percentage points compared to 2019. Percentages decline in 45 of the 47 reportable states and jurisdictions compared to 2019, with declines ranging from 4 to 13 percentage points. These score declines in student confidence had very notable associations with student achievement. About 80% of the 4th grade score decline was associated with a drop in confidence, and 50% of the 8th grade score decline was associated with a drop in confidence. This is another area of concern that NCES will continue to track as we examine progress towards learning recovery. The COVID-19 pandemic has also contributed to a staffing shortage in the nation's schools. Public schools report that they are struggling with a variety of staffing issues, including widespread vacancies and a lack of prospective teachers. Schools in high-poverty neighborhoods, in particular, are struggling with staffing challenges. 16% of schools in high-poverty neighborhoods reported having at least 1 in 10 teacher vacancies, a rate double that of low-poverty neighborhoods. Schools continue to face meaningful challenges posed by the COVID-19 pandemic. We were interested in learning about various community health and income factors that might be associated with changes in student achievement. There is a broad literature base establishing the association of neighborhood health with school readiness and performance. A study commissioned by NCES matched data from a panel of about 700 NAEP Trial Urban District Assessment schools that participated in both the 2019 and the 2022 Grade 4 mathematics assessments with county health data from the 2022 County Health Rankings and Roadmap. The study revealed 3 unique health and income profiles of counties in which schools are located, which align with different degrees of performance changes between 2019 and 2022 NAEP. Schools in the class of counties with the highest health and income profile saw much smaller score declines in NAEP Grade 4 mathematics, 6 points, than schools located in the class with the lowest health and income profile, 11 points. Again, the effects of the pandemic were not evenly distributed, and the road to recovery will look very different for each community in the country. Over the next year, we will continue our efforts to monitor recovery from the pandemic, beginning with the December release of data from the Program for International Student Assessment, or PISA. PISA is an assessment of 15-year-olds in the U.S. and more than 70 participating nations in reading literacy, math literacy, and science literacy. The assessment asks students to show how they can apply what they have learned, both in and out of school, over the course of their academic careers to solve real-world problems. We are also continuing our School Pulse panel with monthly data collections on important topics. Beginning in August 2023 and continuing through June 2024, the monthly survey will ask sample school principals about different topics each month, such as school staffing, after-school programs, learning recovery strategies, tutoring, world language, school meal programs, student and staff mental health, school building facilities, and transportation. And finally, we will conduct NAEP assessments at 4th, 8th, and 12th grade in mathematics and reading, and in science at grade 8, providing us data on changes in student achievement. I was only able to cover a small portion of all of the data and resources available through NCES. I implore you to visit nationsreportcard.gov to discover more information about mathematics achievement and how you can help students improve their knowledge and skills for a productive and bright future. Thank you.
Hello, and thank you so much, Commissioner Carr. Good afternoon, everyone, or good morning, depending on where you are. The scores and data that Commissioner Carr shared paint a stark picture of what's happening in our schools nationwide. This is a reality that students, educators, parents, and policymakers are grappling with. It's a reality that demands action on many fronts. This is intended to be an interactive day, so I want to be sure that you can access the chat. If your screen does not show a chat window on the right, please refresh your screen now. This summit offers us the chance to ensure we're taking action commensurate with the reality of what Commissioner Carr shared in the data. I look forward to learning from all of you about how you're helping students overcome learning gaps, accelerate the pace at which students are building skills and knowledge, and helping them find joy in mathematics. I know our discussions will be fruitful because we all believe in the importance of math, both for individual student success, so that students can pursue the college, career, and life goals of their choice, and for our nation's collective success, because a mathematically literate society is foundational to economic growth and sound public policy. Before we talk about what's next, I want to say a few words about the National Assessment Governing Board, where I have the privilege of serving as executive director. We work in partnership with the National Center for Education Statistics to deliver the nation's report card. We were created by Congress in 1988 to set policy for NAEP. Our charge as an independent, nonpartisan board includes identifying which subjects and grades NAEP assesses, determining the content of NAEP assessments, and setting achievement levels that describe student performance. We also try to find new ways to make the assessment results meaningful to policymakers, practitioners, and the public. This summit, led by NCES and IES, does just that. Reflecting on Commissioner Carr's presentation, I hope we can all consider the national implications if we do not address the sweeping declines in student math performance evident in the 2022 Nations Report Card. The NAEP data shed light on the magnitude of the steep declines and troubling patterns that we need to understand and address head-on. These include the growing gaps between higher performing students and lower performing students, and the notably large learning gaps for historically marginalized student groups. We need to take a particularly hard look at middle school math, where the score drops were especially large. Now, as you know from Commissioner Carr's presentation, on the one hand, the mathematics score declines in 2022 were of a magnitude we've never seen before on NAEP. The declines were across all mathematical content areas. They were not concentrated in just one area like algebra or geometry, but across all skill sets and all areas of knowledge. This was also a national trend. No state or large urban district that NAEP assesses made gains in math in either grade 4 or grade 8 in 2022. The majority declined. It should be a wake-up call. A quarter of fourth graders and more than a third of eighth graders performed below the NAEP basic level in math. This means that 25% of fourth graders couldn't locate whole numbers on a number line, and over a third of eighth graders couldn't find a missing angle in a triangle, even when given the other two angles. Now, on the other hand, as you saw in Commissioner Carr's presentation, it's also true that we saw troubling patterns in NAEP mathematics data well before anyone had ever heard of the coronavirus, social distancing, or universal masking. Analyses of NAEP results from 2009 to 2019 in grades 4, 8, and 12 show the scores of the nation's lowest performing students were declining, while those of the highest performing students were rising. In 4th and 8th grade, these gaps grew to more than 100 points on NAEP's 500-point scale. All these trends and all this data, these are not just abstractions. Research from governing board member and Stanford economist Rick Hanyushek looked at the economic cost of the pandemic using NAEP results. He found the projected impact of learning loss for the COVID cohort of students equates to a whopping 28 trillion with a T, in future lost earnings and lost GDP. This translates to significant economic impacts, both for individuals and for the economy at large. For example, if we don't course correct, today's students in states that had the biggest NAEP declines could face a nearly 9% loss in future lifetime earnings. And if the average college graduate can expect to earn $2.8 million over their lifetime, the effects of COVID would shrink this cohort's future earnings by more than $250,000 over their lifetime. If we don't respond with sufficient energy and focus, states will face lower economic activity, and this generation of students will face diminished economic prospects. But these are our communities and our kids we're talking about, and we know that doing nothing is certainly not the plan. Unprecedented circumstances like these demand an unprecedented response. I'm optimistic that we will mount the sustained response needed, learn from what's been done so far, and address the losses across groups of students at every performance level and across the range of mathematics knowledge and skills, so that young people can be prepared for their chosen path in life. I know it won't be easy, and neither NCES nor the governing board can prescribe solutions, but we can bring experts together like we're doing today and look at responses happening across the country. The evidence to date shows us how difficult academic recovery is, but we have seen progress and models worthy of lifting up firsthand. Los Angeles Unified School District Superintendent Alberto Carvalho took the governing board to observe classes in Los Angeles earlier this year, where we saw firsthand the power of excellent teaching and of a culture of high expectations at Garfield High School, which inspired the movie Stand and Deliver 35 years ago. There, we met graduating seniors from similar circumstances to those as students in the film, although these children had just spent part of their high school careers in virtual learning. Despite that serious disruption to their educations, these young people had prepared themselves for demanding STEM majors at some of the nation's most elite colleges and universities. They are now, this fall, first-generation college students from East LA entering the halls of Yale, Stanford, and Berkeley, on their way to becoming the next generation of engineers, mathematicians, psychologists, and role models for their siblings and neighbors. Board member Dil Uswate, an elementary school principal in Hoover, Alabama, has also shared with us the effects of statewide efforts in her state of Alabama, like updating their math standards, aligning the state assessment to these new expectations, and passing the Numeracy Act to improve math instruction across the state. As a result, more districts in Alabama are using high-quality instructional resources and hiring more math coaches to support teachers. From Hoover, Alabama to Los Angeles and everywhere in between, we know educators are working tirelessly to help students develop these key math skills, build understanding of important concepts, and apply math towards solving real-world problems. Progress is the last word in NAEP, and it's important for us to step back and see what progress NAEP shows us we've made over time. Throughout the 1990s, the aughts, and the early 2010s, NAEP showed that schools were charting real progress in math achievement. Progress on average for all students nationwide, as well as for historically marginalized populations. Schools and communities have faced unprecedented challenges throughout the pandemic, and the size of the task ahead can certainly feel daunting. While we have never faced a pandemic in our lifetimes, we have raised math achievement for all student groups before, and we can do it again. This work is hard, but we must keep our focus. Every child should be a math person. We must all be math people. As you engage with colleagues over these 3 days, I want to encourage each of you to reflect not only on promising new strategies and model policies, but also how you will communicate the imperative of improving mathematics achievement for every child when you get home. You are leaders in your communities, in your organizations, in your fields. You are trusted voices. You are all here because you share a commitment to ensuring every child builds the mathematics knowledge and skills they need to thrive. You know what the data says about the state of math achievement following the pandemic. If you are a parent or regularly engage with families and schools, you may also know that parents and caregivers are not aware of how far behind grade level expectations their children may be. I know this firsthand as a parent of 3 elementary school students. These parents and families may not know that their child or children across the community may need intensive support in math to gain the skills to pursue their career and educational goals. As leaders in this field, I urge you to help convey to families and community leaders the state of math education today and the need for serious and sustained focus on math instruction. Now, after you have their attention, share some hope as well through the examples of incredible work across the country to improve math education, to support students and teachers in overcoming persistent learning gaps, and to bring a love of math to all kids. We cannot successfully tackle this crisis without the understanding and support of our broader communities. So I urge you to use your voice to help articulate what all of our children need to become math people. Thank you. I look forward to the discussion over the next few days. And with that, it's now time to transition to Q&A with NCES Commissioner Dr. Peggy Carr. And while Dr. Carr comes on screen, I just want to remind you that if your chat does not show, or excuse me, if your screen does not show a chat window on the right, please refresh your screen. Gina, I think you're going to cue us up.
Oh, there we go. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Gina Brockstrom, and I'm the Director of Strategic Partnerships for NCES. I want to start off with thanking Dr. Carr and you, Leslie, for your insight into what is happening in student performance and the impact that the findings from our NAEP 2022 mathematics assessments have really provided some insight into what we need to focus on moving not only out of the pandemic, but as we go forward in the upcoming years. So I think now we're going to open up the floor to some Q&A from our attendees, our audience members. If folks want to go ahead and submit those there's a Q&A section or in the chat, we'll start taking those questions now. Let me take a look here. There's a question about, was student participation in 2022 similar to 2019? There's curiosity of whether or not there were any issues with who took the test that could have possibly skewed the data. Peggy, do you want to speak to that for us?
Yes, it's a very important question, one that we examined during our data collection window in 2022. But we were very pleased that the participation rates were comparable. There were students coming in and out with hybrid, but we made special efforts to catch them when they did reappear in school. So no significant differences in the participation rates of students in 2019 and 2022. Good question, though.
Great, thanks. Our next question, is there a correlation between implementation of math standards and the increase or decrease of scores?
Leslie, you want to take that one? The standards are. akin to the framework. I bet you Ray is going to have something to say about that later on today, Ray Hart, our colleague. But yes, Leslie.
So I would say, I think that states, the vast majority of states, more than 40, have adopted updated math standards in the last 10 years. And the declines we saw on NAEP prior to the pandemic, I don't think there was a clear pattern associated with adoption of new standards. So my guess would be that it has to do with implementation and how new standards are being implemented in classrooms, how teachers are being supported with professional development. I see a lot in the chat about the instructional time available for mathematics in middle school. And so I think that those decisions that are being made sort of on the ground probably have more to do with it than the adoption of state standards. But that's my hypothesis.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. We do have to hypothesize about this because we can't quite be sure. I would direct the participant to a special study conducted by the NAEP Validity Panel. I think it is one in which we try to better align the math framework with what was actually being identified in various states. A little differences that we noted there, but they, of course, are based upon an analysis, not an actual experimental study. But we can provide that link to that NAEP Validity Panel study at a later time.
Great, thank you. Sorry, I'm trying to keep up with the questions here. Some good ones coming in.
I see one about whether score declines were similar across the subscales, across the different topics. And I know that's one that we can answer. Peggy,
that'd be great.
Talk about that from 2022?
They were comparable. We did not see any subscales. There are 5 differences. The declines were very comparable. The way the scaling is done, they're not all scaled at the same time, but in comparison to 2019, 2022 subscales, the declines were very comparable.
Great. The next question was for you, Peggy. Comment first. Your message today summarized news that has come out over the past couple years. What promising responses have you seen from the field in the ensuing months since these data have been released?
Well, we were hopeful that we would see something different with the long-term trend age 13. We just really left the field in December of 2022. Long-term trend is basic reading and fundamental basic knowledge and skills for reading and math. And the declines were comparable. So I think, progress is slow. This is a national assessment. We did not have state level data with the long-term trend. So I think, the jury is still out. We don't have our hands on all of the parts of the elephant per se. I think we should turn to our colleagues in the formative data collection part of the larger system and see what they have to say. They're collecting data more often, and they can see changes that we can't see. But from the NAEP perspective, the large-scale national assessment, and I think we'll see something very similar with the international, the progress is yet to emerge.
Great. The next question, as we see the gap increasing, what are people doing to address the increased rates of students not passing the first year of high school math? Any insight or hypothesis of sort of what's happening there? maybe that our data doesn't quite speak to
Yeah,
those.
the question was about 12th grade. Was it not?
Yes.
We're going to be in the field collecting 12th grade data very soon in 2024. So any lack of progress relative to the COVID, pre and post COVID, we really don't have before us yet. In fact, we decided not to collect age 17 so that we could collect some additional data on 9 and 13, so we can focus on those areas where we did have some pre-COVID data. So I think the jury is still out in terms of possible impact of COVID on the 12th grade, but it is really something we're anxious to know. And I would also add that we're going to have transcript data in 2024, where we can compare those data to 2019. So give us a sense of what schools are doing, what students have been doing at the high school level during these past 3 years in terms of their course taking. Very interesting question. So stay tuned for that.
Great. Thanks,
Can
Peggy.
I add to that, Gina? I just want to say that in 20, I think it was in 2020 or 2021. I don't know. Those years were kind of a blur. You released the high school transcript study results from the 2019 math assessment.
Yep.
And so there's really interesting data in there. And this is for Terry Redfern, that about the progress students were making in their mathematics course pathways from 9th grade to 12th grade. So it doesn't speak to the post-pandemic world, but it does help provide some insight into the course pathways that students were taking and associated achievement scores on the 12th grade NAEP.
Great. Thanks, Leslie. Thanks, Peggy. Next question is from Dr. India White. Do we have NAEP data regarding projected closures of the achievement gap per state, per demographic? So kind of wanting to get into more of what we're able to dig into in the data in our gaps. So Peggy, do you want to speak a little bit to what sort of data we have going further into kind of state and district trends for gaps?
Well, we have actual gaps, observed gaps, estimates by state for most of the subgroup comparisons, not for every single state, but for the overwhelming majority of them, but not projections. So we're not at this point projecting what they would be. Perhaps and the caller meant something different. But no, we don't know where it's going. We only know where it is. And that is really demonstrating that we have a long way to go. The gaps are broad. They're deep. They're comprehensive. They're throughout.
Yeah. And I believe we have some resources on our NCES website, our Nations Report Card website, that can help users sort of dig into and look at the data about gaps and where we are. I know that's something we've kind of always tried to add to the breadth of data that we have for the NAEP assessments.
Yeah, Gina, one of the best kept secrets, and you reminded me of it, would be the questions tool that we have out there. And you can examine how students by different subgroups perform on any particular item, and that item can be mapped back to content strands on the framework. So another way to take the deepest dive that we can allow with these data would be in that NAEP questions tool. Great.
It's definitely a great resource. I encourage folks to check it out. I think we have time for a couple more questions. From Timothy Weeks, are there any recommendations for statewide policies that could possibly reverse the trends in mathematics performance that we experienced as a result of COVID-19? Leslie, any thoughts on sort of I know that's a big question, and
well, so I would just say, the job of NAEP, the job of NCES and the governing board is to help provide an objective measure of student achievement and progress. And so it is beyond our mandate from Congress to tell you what policies there are. I will say later today, there's some great sessions being led by the Council of the Great City Schools, which works with the 100 largest urban districts across the country, and the Council of Chief State School Officers. And on that, if you're thinking about state policy in particular, that panel will include 3 or 4 state leaders talking about the work that they're doing in just this way. So I don't think we can answer that question, but that's why we're all here today, is to bring together experts who can.
Great. Well, I think we have to wrap up our Q&A session for today. I know there's a lot of really great sessions coming up over the remaining hours of today's kickoff day of the summit, and then the following 2 weeks. I know we have a jam-packed agenda. I want to thank you, Leslie and Dr. Carr, for taking your time today to not only share these findings from the 2022 math and provide commentary to that, but taking some time to answer some questions from our audience today. There's a lot that came in our chat, and we'll be working to look at those and see if there's a way we can provide responses to those questions as well. So if we didn't get to your question today, we will be taking a look and trying to share as much information with you all as we can in response to your question. So thank you again, Leslie. Thank you again, Peggy. Really appreciate your time. And I hope everyone enjoys the rest of the summit. So thank you all for joining us today.